Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. So I've had a request to do a video on sovereignty and your civil rights. I've had on my own list of stuff an episode I wanted to call Making Slaves, and I thought I would mash them up. So we're going to call this one Sovereign Slavery. So what is slavery? What is it? What's very interesting about slavery is that when I was a kid, I was young enough to see Roots on TV with Geordie playing Kunta Kinte. Apologize for not knowing that actor's name. He is obviously an extremely talented person. And so in my mind, slavery was shackles, working on a plantation, getting whipped, no religious rights, You had to bow down to the white man and say, yes, massa, no, massa. And I think that's a really interesting puzzle for the brain to decipher from childhood up. Because as you get older, you start to realize that slavery comes in all forms. And still, even though I've kind of fractured your definition and you're all thinking, well, any of you have started paying bills in your lifetime, you're all thinking, yeah, well, I know this. And you're probably going off to corporate slavery. May think of a car loan. But then there's another tier above that. And that is the slavery of your addictions, of your vices. And when I say that, most of you thinking probably drugs, alcohol, sex, right? Which are all sort of negative things. Sex not being negative, but if you get addicted to it, just ask that Duchovny guy. He'll tell you all about it, or Russell Brand, or basically 99% of all rock stars. But then there are other things that are more primitive that can make you a slave, like love, companionship, a good conversation. You can be slave to absolutely every single element in life that you either enjoy or that you dislike. So there's this whole hemisphere of thought that we have to become aware of when it comes to slavery. And the counterweight to slavery is usually something that we would call sovereignty. Your rights as a human being because you exist. And if we really go to most of our episodes and the thought process that we share on the show, it's to go up to the rights that you have because you have a soul, because you exist in this universe. We've talked a lot about on the show about what's after this life, in many episodes. I just did one, right? Could you imagine dying and going to the other side and there's a bunch of pricks, like some government bureaucracy that tells you, oh, you can go in that part of the universe. You can't go. You can't talk to them because they're sort of like they're really high up in this engineering thing. They're kind of like the Anthony Hopkins in your Westworld series you had on Earth. Yeah, we don't talk to them. And if the king comes by of the universe, you can only speak if spoken to. You divert your eyes. And can you imagine that? All I got to say is they got to keep us Americans alive so we don't go to the other side and change things. Now, obviously, I have to preface this with I am an American, and this is going to be completely from an American point of view. I don't know how much that'll affect the conversation. That'll probably put some of you off who are not a big fan. I apologize. I'll try to keep it as generic as possible, but there is just a bias of who I am and where I'm from, right? It's just strange. I think that The one thing that people forget about America is it's not any one culture in America. It's not the liberal Seattle folks. It's not the gun-toting Texans or the snooty New Englanders. I used to live there. Trust me. It's none of that. It's an idea based on sovereignty, based on freedom, based on the republic. It all goes back to Europe. To those that were fed up who created Magna Carta, please see my episode of Magna Carta if you dig this subject matter. It is more laser focused to that particular moment in time and how that came about and what happened. So if we have this thing where even if you're a billionaire, you're still a slave. If you're a billionaire, it changes nothing. You're a slave to what you love. You know, some folks, love to eat Cocoa Pebbles every single day, but they don't like being fat. And so they kind of get in and get out as soon as they possibly can. People who are trying to get out of all addictions, they go in, and once you realize you want to be out of an addiction, I think what happens to all of us, no matter what it is you get in this love-hate relationship with your addiction where, I think it devolves to pure hatred after a while. You become disgusted with yourself. You're in this thing. You want to be out. Super frustrating. You go in regretting you're going in. And I'm going to give you this example from especially my friends who struggle with alcoholism. I watch them. They go into it and they want me away from them because they don't want me to see them like that. I still have friends I text with once a week, if not half a dozen times a week, and they are alcoholics. And we do get together like once every quarter or so to have a dinner or whatever. And it has to be very quarantined because they don't want me to go to restaurants that they go to where they're going to bump into their other drinking buddies. And then we have an issue where they're going to say, hey, man, let me get you a drink. Let's go further into this. But I know that inside them, they are loathing this dependency. I mean, I know you guys all get this stuff, but I'm throwing this out there just to kind of reemphasize the slow change in the mind and the soul of being a human being with these addictions. Americans are taught that America is an idea, but then it quickly turns into a bunch of patriotic stuff that loses track of the idea. There's this whole push for globalism, which thankfully to some brave Americans who voted for the right person, they put a hold on this. The secret societies of the world, the pedophilia, human trafficking groups of the world have been paused. Global warming scandal has been paused. All the elites that were recently elected in Europe have no power anymore because they need America to play along. Some, previous countries that were communistic, they are turning into kind of control capitalism countries, and they're forming their own gold and their own currencies that's backed by gold. So they're walking away from globalism as well. They're just creating unified partnerships between their national borders. Down from globalism, we have something called nationalism, where you are proud of your country. I am proud of my country, and I hope, I don't give a crap where you live, that you're proud of your country too. Even if you disagree with the way it's currently being run, get out there and vote. If you're being beat up by your police, you know what you got to do. You know what you got to do. Just go buy a U.S. history book, starting about the time that the Mayflower landed on, Plymouth Rock, as they say. Read up from there. Read up to about, 1776, and just do everything that we did. Yeah, it's on your watch. You're going to have to get off your ass and risk your life, and a bunch of you are going to lose your life. But in the end, this reason why you want to migrate to the United States will disappear. And I know my European folks, most of them want to stay in Europe, and that's great. So make that country what you want it to be. But I tell you right now, Mussolini, what he was trying to do to his people around the time of World War II is exactly what the EU is trying to do to Europe right now. Right? But they're losing. They're losing for the very first time. So this message is actually fairly important, and I'm not sure I'm going to do it any justice, but I will do my best. The reason why we have to go into slavery, because we have to totally understand sort of the checklist of things of what do we have to protect in the civil rights side of things, the rights themselves, right? Now, when I say civil rights, you think of, segregation and the black movement in the 60s, Martin Luther King, God bless him, Malcolm X, all those great guys. But it goes way beyond that. It's colorblind. It's a human rights thing that we have as human beings. What do you do when anything breaks in the world? What do? You take it to a place that can look at it and see what's wrong, give you a little bid, hopefully, and you make the decision of whether or not you're going to get it fixed. And then you move from there. All right, well, that's what this whole episode's about. But here's the twist. The twist on this is that I believe that we will always have a part of slavery inside of sovereignty. And some of that is the internal stuff, our internal psychology, that we won't be able to get rid of because we are sentient beings and we are alive. But then there's a whole other hemisphere of it, which is folks that are above us, that we, in our brains, okay, we have bullshitted ourselves through some super concentrated, super dense, reinforced Stockholm syndrome, which is, I had an episode on this. This is where you fall in love with your captors, right? The British people who worship the king and queen, Prince Philip and the queen, they are in a self-deluded, self-policing, groveling state to a family that simply was in the right place at the right time. And now they worship them. Worship them. Not everybody. As I've had it told to me by my close friends in the UK, anybody with a brain thinks that the royal family is the scum of the earth. That they should be absolutely ostracized. Their wealth should be seized and distributed back to the people of England, because it was on the backs of the people of England that gave them that wealth in the first place. So it's all ill-gotten gains. But I'll let the British people sort that out. I have no opinion personally. I think monarchies can't be legislated away from our president of the United States. We don't have him here. We got out of that game a long time ago. So if you got him in your country, you're going to have to mature and get out of that thing. You have to start having conversations in living rooms and on the streets of like, why do we have these things anymore? You know? Now here's one of the sort of interesting themes of these kind of shows when it's a guy like me talking into the camera. Now, for those of you who live in worlds without monarchs and worlds that are free, and you got a decent, I guess, first stage balance between, government and the people and the police and the people. I have the privilege, under one circumstance, to talk to folks that might be in different worlds where they don't have these privileges, right? So it's sort of like smuggling it out. But, I don't think people from, really repressed third world countries are getting a chance to watch this. They don't speak English, whatever. So it's going to have to get out to you guys and remind you guys of the issue and get you to be really poignant about your own opinions, especially if they differ from mine. That's great. And then you have to find relatives and friends and whatever you can do to inject it further so it spreads like a virus of sovereignty, right? So, I've talked about on several shows, and again, if you're brand new, this will all be new to you, but we talk about common law, which in its most basic form is do no harm to others. And really, that's all you really need to do, but you should probably not do harm to yourself, but I guess that's up to you. Once you say do no harm, I guess I keep getting that backwards, it's awful. Do no harm to others, then you have to really think through your day, think through your cycle. If you've never contemplated that, then contemplate it and take inventory from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed, especially for all the various tasks that you complete in a month, a year, a decade, whatever. And do no harm to others is probably the best statement in the world, because the Bible, in the Christian sense, puts out a phrase that doesn't work very well, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That opens yourself up to a bunch of problems, basically. Like, I'm very tough on myself in a very fun way. I love it. My buddies are guys that will flat out tell me I'm messed up right to my face, and sometimes, they'll take the liberty to yell it. And even if they catch me off guard, I'm a little surprised by it. Within microseconds, I'm looking at them like, this is a true friend. This is it. As long as they come back around and go, now get your shit together. Love you, brother. See you later. That kind of thing, that kind of rapport. My father was military, so he was strict about the things that he thought were really important. And then he could give a crap about all the things that society gives a shit about, especially swearing. Swearing among the boys. You weren't allowed to swear in front of the ladies, right? But it's a big, complex mess nowadays, isn't it? In 2018, man, you have different religions running around the world trying to reinforce their dying doctrines. We have, non-religious folks just trying to figure out how to balance society. We have scientists that have now, through global warming bullshit, have been told that, yeah, you get to form laws that govern human beings because you're a scientist. You're Bill Nye, the never had a science degree guy. He's some civil engineer or something, I don't know. Yeah, but that's some right fucking knowledge from, 1979. But what I want to do to frame this particular episode is to talk about it from your own personal standpoint. Because you have some decisions to make once you care about this whole paradigm. And I'm going to try to button the episode up with a brief take on the straw man, the person, which is going to sort of be one of the mechanisms we got into this in a global sense of the term. A lot of people try to make changes to the world without understanding who they are as a human being. And there's an old saying you don't know where you're going. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And a lot of people think of that statement in a more literal sense of, well, I was in Toledo, Ohio, then I moved to Kansas, then I moved to... No, it doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It has to do with who are you as a human being, and who were you, and where are you going with your personality? And do you have a high enough elevation view of the world to understand this is what society looks like down there? And I'm one of the little electrons in the circuitry down there, because you're playing a part in the overall bistro that is the computer in the Douglas Adams script that is calculating something. We are this machine of, moving something from over here and make the espresso, move it over there, and you drink it, and then you order a steak, and boom, boom, boom. Everything has an ecosystem to it. And everything that we do in the world is affecting everything else, the butterfly effect, of course. Now, when you think of the butterfly effect in its literal translation, what is it? The butterfly in Peru changes the tea in China sort of thing. But when you think about the consciousness wave of human beings, if you become a serf, a slave, you become docile because you consume a lot of fluoride, you consume a lot of aluminum out of the sky, you take flu shots all the time, then this sort of bend over forward over the barrel is the life that you are going to exude. Your halo of influence, when people get around you, this meekness starts to infect and break down the overall backbone of society. So we as human beings need to become, I think you have to become extremely sentient to what you believe are your rights, starting from stop messing with me and go all the way up. Now, because society has been made so complex, right? Just think about living in a house by yourself or with your family. But yeah, let's actually go to yourself. You've just moved out of your parents' house and you're going to start paying the bills for some little shack. No roommates, none of that stuff, because we want to cleanse this analogy as clean as we can. You're going to need running water, electricity, probably some form of internet, depending on if you have computers or you're just using your phone, but you'll need a cell phone. You need clothing. You need food. You need plumbing. All this good stuff, right? Where are you going to get it? Right? If you live out in the jungle and you're crapping down a hill and you can hunt and skin and all this other stuff, then maybe you can kind of get away from dependencies on others. But in this world today, no matter how third world you are or first world you are, you have dependencies with the world. And once you have a dependency with the world, then you can be controlled. And this is where I've said many times that strategic resources of the world are the resources that society needs to survive. North Korea needs food. It does. It needs whatever they use to generate heat in homes, whether it be oil or electricity. They need it. If they don't get it, people start dying. Or in our little analogy, you die. And so as soon as you need to get something from someone else, then the manipulation can begin. And it's that dependency that turns on the sort of slavery spigot. Because if I'm a nice guy and we have a little island together, maybe there's like 10 of us, and each one of us takes care of one of the utilities. One person's a great hunter. One person is really good at making electricity, and so on and so forth. And we all agree to be good to each other. And there's no resource crisis that's hanging over our head, right? Then society will be fantastic. Just as long as everyone gets up and they have good health and no one's getting sick and dying and we have any deprivation of what we need. But the second it turns into a headless corporation, well, then we have laws where we start to say, okay, if the guy who makes electricity dies, we have to have a backup plan. So he's going to have to train somebody, her, he, whatever, and making sure that that resource is always replenished. And you know what? Once we figure out how to store this stuff, we should probably store it in case we have a bad season for electricity generation, whatever it is. The gerbils can't run in a circle anymore. Richard Gere's using a few of them. Now let's fast forward to keep this interesting. One of the things that pisses me off the most about our, and we're all guilty of this, is that we allow paradigms of thought to absolutely dominate and control our existence. One of the key paradigms of thought that needs to be absolutely erased, more so than any fabled Holocaust anywhere in history, is debt. This idea that we have debt. And it's easier to explain on a nation level than it is on an individual level. The scam goes all the way down to you. The Ponzi scheme of fiat money creation is a joke. But one of the easiest ways to describe it is the way that, say, a country like America borrows money from the European banking cartel to have it created into our ecosystem. It's been a very long time since I described this, so let me just describe this one more time, in case you haven't caught all the other 200 episodes. If you want $1 from me, and I have $1 in my pocket, and we sit at a table, just a big round table with nothing on it, old wooden table from the 1850s, and I put that $1 on the table, and I say, okay, here's the deal. You're going to pay this back to me whenever you do, at 10 cents on the dollar interest. So when you pay me back, you got to give me $1 plus 10 cents. But you're in this world. And here's a contract that we're going to sign that's going to guarantee that you agree to this 10% interest. And you're like, yeah, 10 cents, that's a little high, but 10 cents, what do you care? You sign it. Now that's called a bond. It bonds you to me. You got to pay me back. Now, if I said right after that, pay me back right away, within an hour. You haven't spent the $1 yet, so you give it back to me, and you could rummage around your house, and you'll find 10 cents in a seat cushion. You bring it right to me. I go, thank you very much. I signed the bond, paid. We're done. We tear it up. We burn it. Whatever. Okay. But if you are the United States of America, and I am the banking cartel, the World Bank, the IMF, hidden banks that you have no idea exist, you ask me for $1. And we run the same deal, except that tabletop is now a different object. The tabletop is a metaphor for your entire country. If it doesn't exist on that tabletop in the forms of currency, it doesn't exist at all, ever. And so I have this printing press on my end of the table where I can make monopoly money that you use. You ask me for $1. I want my little printer. There's the dollar. Here's the bond, the contract between you and I that you're going to pay me back $1 plus 10 cents interest. You sign it, and the second after you sign it, I say to you, all right, pay me back right now. And you're like, oh, okay, well, here's your $1 back. And I say, well, okay, go get me the other 10 cents you owe me. Now, if you're the United States of America, and there's no other money that's ever been made, because I control all of your money creation. There's not a penny in a cushion anywhere. There's no previous currency that's ever going to be honored. You're going to look at me and go, well, this is screwed up. I don't have the 10 cents. How am I going to pay you back? How did I ever get in this contract in the first place? Because there's no other currency in motion and you didn't make the 10 cents. So how do I pay you back? And I say, that's your problem. What I will do though, is I'll loan you the 10 cents at 30 cents interest, 3,000% interest. And you're going to go, actually it's 300%, but you're going to say, well, that sounds illegal. That sounds weird. This is an impossible scenario. It's what we call the Ponzi scheme. All of the money created in the United States of America from 1913 and up, after the 16th Amendment was forced into motion, is basically criminal money. It is as counterfeit as it could possibly get. And the only reason why the money of America isn't considered to be counterfeit is because our brains are defective. We have been convinced that the artificial is real. And the reason why America has a giant national debt to a bunch of banks in Europe is because our brains have been institutionalized into slavery, into thinking that that's a real debt. To top it off, when we do pay back the debt, they've got a printing press on their end that has nothing that backs it. There's no gold, there's no nothing that backs it. But oftentimes, well, in almost every case, when we labor in America to use our dollars to manufacture something, sell something, we actually are giving back to the bankers real product, something that actually has value. So imagine I print a $100 bill out of Monopoly. I just give you a $100 bill out of the Monopoly game, and I say, you owe me not only the $100, but you owe me interest, but I want you to pay it back in a gold wafer, a gold coin. You're like, what? I'm taking a fake piece of paper that's freaking, was it orangey yellow in Monopoly? And you want me to go off and find gold somewhere? What do you want me to dig in the ground and find gold? And I'm like, yeah, I am the European banking cartel. I want you to go find gold in Deadwood, South Dakota. Go dig it out, melt it down. I don't care who you have to rape, beat, pillage to get it. You bring that back to me. Now, let me give you a little question here, a little rhetorical question. On one side of the table, you have this pasty bastard from one of those royal families, whether they be honored as royalty officially as monarchs, or whether or not they're royalty merely because they're part of the oligarchy that is the banking cartels of Europe. But there's some guy on the other side of the table, and you're a hardworking American on the other side of the table, or German, or Frenchman, or Italian, or Spaniard, or Polish person, or Norwegian. And you simply said, fuck you, man. Why don't you try to come get it? If at the very beginning we would have nipped it in the bud and just said, either take this crap back, tear up that bond, this was misrepresented as a fair deal, but this is a Ponzi scheme. By the way, I'm going to tell the rest of the world that you're a Ponzi scheme. If it had never gone to the next stage and ever been implemented in any country around the world, this wouldn't have happened. But it happened thousands of years ago. You know, there's a passage in the Bible where Jesus turns over the money changers in the temple. Now, it's a fictitious event, but the reason why it was written into the story, and it was written to a story that was supposed to be highly accessible to all the people of Europe at the time, meaning they understood it, was because they understood it. They knew that money changers existed, which is to say, someone says they have gold in a vault and they write paper notes against that gold. But they know that they can issue way more paper notes. 10 times is the minimum amount they can issue into the public where there is no problem, because nobody wants to carry around the big bars of gold. And then it turned into, well, we don't have any gold, but let's just pretend we have gold. I mean, they're willing to exchange this paper as real. Really? Yeah, they never come for the gold. Look at America. These dipshits think they have a bunch of gold, something called Fort Knox, named after Philander Knox and not the Navy Knox guy, who was the guy that helped write the 16th Amendment and get it passed. God damn, are these people absolutely gullible. It's painted tungsten, if there's anything in there at all. I think most Americans understand that Fort Knox has no gold in it, but nobody is willing to say that the emperor has no clothes on. So every time I hear some news report about addressing national debt in the United States of America, it sort of infuriates me that we're still so absolutely stupid that we believe it's real. Some of you may have heard of the story of the gentleman, which I think was in Illinois. I could be wrong. He was being foreclosed on his house. It was about a $25,000 house. It wasn't a huge loss to the bank, but this was several years ago. And they were trying to foreclose on him because he couldn't pay his loan. And he walked in there and said, look, the bank never owned my house, so I don't have to pay back the debt. And he caught the judge. I don't know what circuit his case was being tried in, but the judge is like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, the bank never had the money that they said they loaned me, but they were able to use fractional reserve banking to create the money from scratch, and in hopes that I would go labor my life and create real money and give it to them. And then they would have the real money with which they would loan 10x against that money to someone else, creating 10 times the fraudulent loans that they already gave me. And somehow, justice was served. The bank was told, he's right. You can't take his house. And I think the bank just said, you know what? This is a really volatile situation here to themselves. Let's not get this any more press than it already has received. It's only 25 grand. We can write this off in 2 seconds. Let the old bastard have his house. Well, that's the same exact formula on a micro scale that we can do to the debt of pretty much every single country in the world that's ever borrowed that kind of money. And I mean, not that kind of money in terms of overall number, but that kind of money in terms of fiat currency, right? If you came to someone's house and they were a big giant hoarder, you know, like Sanford and Son times 10, they got cars in the back, their house is filled to the brim with filled up diapers or whatever they have is a problem, and you had the job of cleaning it all up. You know that there's not one thing you can do to clean it all up. You're going to have to do hundreds of things, different strategies for different things. If you have 45 cats in there, you're going to have to bring in veterinarians to pull them all out and check them, take care of, dispose of the dead bodies of cats. You're going to have to get some health agency in there to get rid of all the excrement. Some salvage yards got to take all the cars, and it's going to take time. Even if you could get everyone there on the same day, well, there's logistics of getting in and out of the house. Not everybody can use the doorway at the same exact time. And you don't have time to orchestrate everything, right? That example applies to us trying to clean up our countries, trying to clean up our brains. And so it's all going to have to go in stages. You know, the first thing that was going on when the internet blew up was 9/11. People were finally figuring out that this whole thing was a fraud. And even that continued through 10 stages of refinement where physics and aviation started proving that certain things couldn't have happened. Now, before that, there was, you know, all kinds of other conspiracies, JFK, moon missions, all kinds of stuff, Jimmy Hoffa, whatever. Dorothy Kilgallen. But now what's happened? We've had a monumental coup from the globalism. And because America is such a huge player economically in everything, which may change, that like we don't give a shit. Honestly, we can make every single thing we need on this continent. We have every single resource that we need to make televisions, stereos, cars, military, everything. We don't have to borrow anything. We got uranium, trust me. Well, whatever. But there's been a huge change in the bullshit that's been going on all around the world, right? And it's going in layers, and it's getting more and more complex, and sadly, although thankfully, darker. Meaning the issues that we are fixing in this planet are getting darker because we're getting to the minutia, the sludge that is the black blood that runs through people like Lady Gaga and John Podesta. People go to spirit cooking rituals. Go look up Lady Gaga and spirit cooking and tell me how she should host the next Super Bowl halftime. You got to ditch these people, by the way. Let me just, there's not going to be a way I could put this in an entire episode, so let me make this very clear. We have to ditch musicians and celebrities of all kinds, actors that are trying to perpetuate and sell out to globalism. They show up at these parties. They get inside satanic rituals, weird, just weird events that they have their photos taken. It's crazy. People who criticize folks that are trying to help the rest of the world, starting with their own country. Don't buy their music. And I would even say, do yourself a favor and destroy their music. The pharaohs had this philosophy that as long as their name was spoken, they still lived in reality. So if we say, Ramses the First, Ramses is still alive. We say King Tut, King Tut's still alive. But what if we stop saying any of those words? We erase them from the history of our world. Then they cease to exist and their bad influence goes away. And as long as we carry the lesson that we learned by their crappy existence in our life, there used to be people that used to act like this and we got rid of them. We didn't kill them. We didn't bury them in the ground early or anything, but we just basically excommunicated them because they wanted to turn the world into a piece of shit. They wanted to take away all of your rights and make you the biggest slave on planet Earth. You lost your sovereignty because of these people. We did. And you're not living in that world. And hopefully we will have figured out ways to put in regulations to keep that from happening. Right? Imagine a bunch of artificial intelligence that preserves freedom instead of taking it away. What if we built governments that actually preserve freedom instead of taking it away? And what's beautiful about what's going on right now is you have a bunch of, military guys that have given their lives for this, or they've given their lives in the way that they're still alive, that they've sacrificed time. They've seen their friends die, and they're livid that someone like De Niro could essentially, pull down his pants and take a huge crap on their deeds. Because that's what he does. These guys taking knees, right? What a fucking joke that is, right? You got these guys worth hundreds of millions of dollars taking knees, right? Yeah, tell me how brilliant this is. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. You could actually make a commercial with your money. Hell, they could probably get paid to make the commercial. They could actually exploit their own bullshit agenda. But they take this silent knee because really they have IQs the size of fucking acorns. And so they don't really know what they're doing. They just want to be a part of something that sounds profound because shit, man, football is my life. It's not profound. It is probably the most unprofound thing, and it starts for one reason. And then they realize that doesn't play well with the politics of the world or with the people that want to see football played instead of paraded around as some political bunch of bullshit. And so then they shift it to something else that they think matters. What are you kneeling for? Well, today it's because lemonade doesn't have enough lemon in it, If you really cared, you'd make change happen. And you wouldn't do it through some pussy technique, like taking a knee, right? Oh, you controversial heavyweights of society. And for every Neanderthal who thinks they're going to, muscle people like me into submission, there's a guy from Delta Force that's got a fucking laser on your forehead, so you just knock yourself out. One of the best ways you can affect change to preserve your civil rights and prevent slavery is to make every action that is against your civil rights and for slavery stick out like a sore thumb. Right? That's pretty much the way you can affect change in anything in life. Make it stick out. Imagine if every parent slept with, the neighbor's children. And let's say we have a pretty good era in society where everyone's, being honest about it and they're protecting these children, all that kind of stuff. But then you have a John Podesta coming in, some Harvey Weinstein coming in, who, and Harvey's never been accused of the child thing, but some weirdo. And he's taking advantage of this moment to do things he's not supposed to do. Now we have a problem on our hands. Well, do you really need to sleep with children? No, you don't. You don't. So we all stop. We stop something we don't need to be doing in the first place. And now the guy that does it, or wants to do it, starts sticking out like a sore thumb really quickly. And we can start identifying the individuals that need to change. One of the things that pisses me off about the Secret Service is that, we've had, I think we're up to at least a dozen blowhard celebrities who have threatened to either blow up the White House or they have enacted in many ways Snoop Dogg shooting Donald Trump with some faux gun, Kathy Griffin, holding a severed head of the president. And no one is getting put in jail. All right. So when a bunch of crazies start planning to kill the president for real, how do you discern the difference between a Kathy Griffin, whose career has been over for a really long time, and trying to pull a stunt here, and a kid who's really plotting to do it, some nutbag? Well, you said it was okay, Secret Service. You said it was okay to threaten the president of the United States, and you blow it off because you think it's, Madonna's not really going to blow up the White House. She's not really going to rig it with explosives and push a plunger. Yeah, probably not. But what if you gave her a plunger and said, she's in upstate New York at some spirit cooking ritual with Lady Gaga, and some elite guy walks in the room and says, it's funny, this plunger right here, it just looks like a toy. It's actually rigged to the White House. You don't think Madonna would turn that fucking thing as quickly as possible and high five everyone in the room? You're delusional if you don't think that would happen in 2 seconds. It's really funny how the old passages in the Bible talk about, times when society had completely deteriorated and God did a reset because everybody was behaving just horribly. We had lost track of why we exist on this planet. Raping and pillaging was not even raping and pillaging. It was just a weekend. Even though it's a very small group of society, they get a lot of press. The folks that are trying to make sure that your kids have no idea what gender they are, right? They want your kid as pregnant as fast as possible and their life completely upside down. They want them uneducated and dependent on the state. They like it that Mexico hasn't been helped by a foreign country and that these people have to migrate because it's so messed up down there. They love it. The Democrats love it. They get their voting base. I think one of the biggest problems with looking at the history of freeing your country is that there's bloodshed, there's effort, there's risk, and there's loss. Who the hell wants to read that manual and accept that that's the way you're going to have to behave if you're to ever give your children and all their children down below a good life? You're going to actually have to nut up, get organized, and coup slavery, coup the governments that would have you be in some slave nation. One of the sad realities of the world is that there are definitely more than a dozen nations, but the population has been so dumbed down by its leaders formerly not so dumb, and they've been dumbed down. There's a big, Schwab of people here in America that are getting very close to that level, or if they're not already there. But they don't have any idea how to run a country. And this has happened several times over, in almost every major region. I think America is one of the only countries, because we were a late bloomer built out of European intellectuals, to not have this problem. But the Wild West of America was very similar to this. People formed towns. They got a couple good people, and then the scallywags go in there and they start just dominating it with force. I come from Kansas. We have Dodge City, which is more notorious than Tombstone. Ha, Toontown. Where am I going? It was Law of the Jungle for a little while. When the rumored, although contradicted and not verified by a single soul, statement of Donald Trump saying shithole for Haiti and a couple countries in Africa, which again, what I thought was very interesting about this is, one, you have at least 3 senators said they never heard that in the room, and you didn't have a single Democrat in the room that confirmed the other guy's claim, which wouldn't that be pretty easy? Well, I heard him say it. 3 other people say I heard him say it. You didn't hear a single person confirm it, but whatever. Most of my friends are hoping he did say it. But I think it was a guy from Ghana. I could have the country wrong, but an African gentleman sat in his car, who's now an American citizen. He has a very profound African accent. And he said, you know what? My country is a shithole. And he goes, it needs to be recognized as a shithole, because if it's not recognized as a shithole, no one's going to ever do anything about it. If you don't recognize Haiti as a shithole, then who's going to go down and fix it? The Hillary Foundation stole billions of dollars from them. And for those of you who missed it, Haiti had a big hurricane. The hurricane destroyed the crap out of that country. It was already horribly bad off. It always has been. It's been engineered to be this way. Okay? The Hillary Foundation moved in and said, give us all of the billions of dollars worth of donations to fix this place, and we'll fix it up. I think they built 6 homes, little tiny shanty shacks, and took the rest of the money and ran with it. And so the country didn't receive any of the aid that was given. Billions of dollars. These people would live in mobile homes. They would live in 10 by 10 shacks if it just had a light and some plumbing. The amount of money they raised would have turned that place into a true, registered, potentially, I don't want to say necessarily flourishing right away, but it would have been pining in the right direction country. Unbelievable. Now, what I don't want to do in this episode, and I haven't done hopefully, is really just lecture you about what you already know. The challenge of being a quote-unquote first world citizen right now is that we have so allowed the educational system, at least in America, to deteriorate so badly that most of the protests that have gone over the last 2 years have been jam-packed with these quote-unquote students and graduates of college that when you ask them, why are you here? They can't give you any details. They give you, slurs and name-calling. They have no idea why they're there. They don't like themselves in the mirror because they have been completely compromised by social conditioning. TMZ has been their church their entire lifetimes, right? Instagram is their world. They want something to change, and they know something is horribly wrong. But they're so absolutely uneducated about anything, and I mean anything, that they are being had by these cult leaders like George Soros, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, into believing, that their captors are their saviors, and their saviors are their captors. One cool thing about smoking cigars, and I've said this a couple times in different contexts, but say you go smoke a cigar at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at a good smoke lounge. If there's anyone in the room, you're usually not dealing with anyone unemployed because the art costs too much. So you're usually in the room with fairly successful business people taking a break, waiting for a phone call, doing a little bit of work on their laptop before they go off to their next thing. In LA, you're dealing with millionaires and billionaires. And I know money has been this supposed sort of oil and water thing between us and society, right? Or them and society, I should say, right? The one percenters. What you don't find is, you don't go into these smoke lounges and find an English teacher in there who knows how the world works. One of the key things that you can do, and I've said this once before, is if you have someone who is, toting this fascism with a t-shirt that says they're not a fascist, is ask them how a dollar bill is created in the United States of America. How's it created? How does it get value? What is the exchange of paperwork that goes back and forth? How is that debt ever paid back? They have no knowledge of how the world works, and I mean zero. And that's how slavery grows in the bad way. There's been this gigantic push for, equality for women, and Black Lives Matter. And for the female side of it, I just recently heard this brilliant statement, which is if someone were to ask you, do you believe in equality for women? You have to say, define equality. You have to define it. Oh, well, she does the same job as a man. That's a generalization. Does she have the same exact experience? Can she get it done just as well as he would? If that's the case, then absolutely. In fact, can she do it better than he does? Well, then perhaps she should make more money than he does. It's all about making money. If you work for a company, you're responsible for making money, either by saving money or making money. All right, let's just look at the bottom line. How do you affect the bottom line? Who cares what's between your legs? It doesn't matter. Equality, it shouldn't even come up. What gender you are, it shouldn't come up. There are so many lies about the way that the world used to work. It's ridiculous. I've been talking to my friends from Kansas and coming again from a really small town. What is apparent, and again, everyone in your hometown almost, and a lot of people from all the surrounding towns. You can walk up to somebody from a town of 10,000 like mine and say, were the women ceremoniously beaten by their wives back in the day? Because that's what Hollywood wants me to think. Were the women stupid and weak? No, they weren't. You can watch shows on TV where you have normal people. I've been addicted to this old 50s show that actually went way into the 60s called What's My Line? And it's not line as in something you would say. Line is the synonym for work. What's your job? What's your trade? Today it would be called What's My Job? And the way the show works is you have these 4 sort of panelists, 2 female, 2 male. That's the formula. And then a random person comes out, signs a blackboard. They say their name. They get a good look at them. And the rules matured over time, but they have to guess that person's profession through 20 questions. Every time they force the contestant to say no, they flip this little panel over and you have 10 no's. You can basically do 10 no's and then the panelists lose. So if they can get it before 10 no's, so if someone asks the question, it's yes, 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 they can keep asking questions. Dorothy Kilgallen and I forget the other lady's name were on the show almost from start to finish. Dorothy was murdered because she was a journalist that uncovered some stuff. They're probably going to do a show on everyone who's ever been famously murdered because they were smart and uncovered something. It's going to go all over time. It's going to go between genders. It's going to be pretty interesting. But my point in mentioning this show is that the contestants that come on that are female, that are trying to hide what they do for a living, and then the 2 women that are always rotated through the show are always, at least up until 65, when it was all in black and white. RCA lost the patent in black and white on the 65, and so you started seeing Gilligan's Island turn into color and all that kind of stuff. They're brilliant women, and they're the exact kind of women that were in my family, all over my town. My first software job in California, the CEO was a woman, and we had 40% women in the company, and they all held senior positions, senior coding positions, senior sales and marketing. It's been made an issue to distract you from the human civil rights, the human pay structure, right? Everyone's worried about a woman getting the same money as a man. Well, how about just humanity making a living wage To hear some goddamn celebrity go up and grab a piece of gold for some, performance they did reading someone else's lines, right? They get all the credit for the director, the special effects, the lines that were written for them, their wardrobe. They're getting the full gamut of credit for a bunch of stuff they have nothing to do with, and then they get their performance credit, telling you how the world works when they no longer know what anything costs in this planet besides their $14 million home. I don't fear any one of the listeners of this show being addicted to that, but it's something we have to remind people of. Black Lives Matter. All right. I haven't, I live in an area that's predominantly white. I hang out with white people and I hang out with everybody, but I spend plenty of time in closed doors with white people. And I'm not sitting in a pool of people going, well, everything was good until that black person showed up. They could say that to me. They could if they wanted to. I don't hear that. I have to go all the way to the Midwest and find some guy in his fucking 60s to hear a statement like that. And he's like the one weird guy in the whole town that says something like that. The blacks in America, I think, represent, something like 11% of this country. Now, I want you to pick any time of day in prime time on television. Cruise through the channels. Write down the sex and the race of every person on TV. Especially go through the sports games, right? Get some little bit of basketball, football, baseball, and write down everyone's race and gender. Everyone on TV is making a damn good living. Trust me. And tell me if you don't have more than 11% of the people you see on TV being black. Or some other race, right? If this is such a huge upside down pound cake of racism in this country, then why is that the case? Why isn't basketball still a white sport, right? Why isn't music all white? It's not. It's a distraction so that they can go around the crowd fighting each other, these two people fighting each other, these two groups fighting each other, scapegoating all of their personal problems against something phantom, and find out that everyone in the room of every race and every gender, no matter how bent your gender might be, you've lost all your rights because you were paying attention to the wrong target. Do we have racism? Yes, of course we do. Is it more cultural based? Yes. As we melt our pots together, the cultures melt together and we have less cultural differences, right? They always give black guys a problem, and I haven't seen this in black females, but if a black guy becomes a cop, a police officer, a law enforcement guy, and he starts to abide by the rules of the state and starts to serve and protect, he'll get a lot of Uncle Tom comments from his fellow black people. Even a white person will be, that's the whitest black guy I ever met. That's like this little sort of backhanded, insult. Being penalized because he no longer, whether or not he ever did, it changed his cultural alignment to a different culture than the one perhaps he was born in, or the one that's more typical in their particular race. He's being penalized for potentially upgrading, getting out of the ghetto, not protecting a street block because you sell drugs on it, Again, I grew up in a rib joint where I was one of the only white kids in the whole room. And there were no kids. That was the weird thing. There was all grown black men playing billiards. The amount of wisdom in that room was off the chain. There was no stereotypical stuff going on at all that I remember, right? And I remember being there quite a bit. We're in a very, very exciting time in history right now. The sovereignty is something that we even know. Like when I was... Honestly, I probably completed my 20s without knowing what the word sovereignty meant. I didn't know what tyranny meant. Serfdom. I didn't know what these words meant. So how the hell could I have a consciousness that would defend it? And these protests that are going on all over the United States of America are devoid of these terms. The fact that they were actually, George Soros and his MoveOn.org, with the help of Bernie and Hillary, were able to form a gigantic collective of kids that are fighting for pure fascism, naming themselves after the European organization called Antifa, anti-fascism, is fucking hilarious and also sort of disturbing at the same time. But because they are a tiny little collective that happens to get a lot of press from the fake news, we feel like they're a hell of a lot bigger than they are. They're a tiny fucking dot on a tiny fucking dot, trust me. Now, I promised I would end on the straw man. And I'll probably do a whole episode on this, but let me give you a bit of the precursor, and a bunch of you already know this. And if you think I'm skipping stuff, you better believe I know I'm skipping stuff. And when we do a full episode on it, we're going to get into it in a heavy way. One of the legal constructs that is used to control your life is that when you're born, you're the sovereign being, right? You're a baby in this world. As much as you have parents and they are responsible for you legally until you're 18, before your birth certificate is signed, you are the most free creature on this planet, and no agency in the world perceptively, legally, has any connection to you at all until your name is written on a birth certificate in all caps. I was born in Germany on a army base, and actually an Air Force base, and Margaret Thatcher was stamped on my birth certificate, matter of fact. And I have a big pyramid with a seeing eye on the top of it, because that's how they built those birth certificates. It was actually processed through the state of California, which means I have a California Social Security number, which is kind of funny considering I finally moved here. We have a legal entity that's created on your behalf that then you are sort of involuntarily assigned to take care of that entity on paper. The reason why your name is in all caps is that anything in a legal document in all caps is considered a legal entity. You'll find this in all contracts, where you're reading a paragraph at the top of a contract and the participating parties are all in caps. And then they are aliased to mixed character things that'll be referred to later in the document. It's legally aliasing you to a smaller thing. And that way they can create boilerplates and they don't have to write your name in every paragraph every time you're referenced, right? It says client or vendor or whatever. But this is carried your entire life. This is carried into your driver's license, social security number, every time you buy property, every time you engage the state on any level or the government. You are this legal entity. For those of you who've never heard of this, you might find it really fascinating that we live in the United States of America Corporation, all in caps, that the Supreme Court is ruling from some bylaws, which are basically made up rules that govern a corporation. Like if you created a bakery and you call it Best Pastries on Earth, Inc., it's all in caps. You then have the option of writing a bunch of rules of how your company is run. You have to wear bbed and white pants, and you have to be this, that, and the other thing. If you have shares in the company and you die, your wife or your husband only gets certain access to those shares and blah, blah, blah. And you sign the dotted line, you agree to follow those rules. So every single entity in the world, every state, city, county, fire department, library, all have corporations that govern them. And it's to turn them all into legal entities so they can be controlled by this grand corporation. The Supreme Court, which we go to as the final finale of any final litigation in America, rules down in the layman's mind from the Constitution down to us to say this is constitutional, this is unconstitutional. Okay. What they are really doing is they are employees of the District of Columbia, which is its own sovereign country, just like the Vatican. And just like, I believe, Buckingham Palace or what have you, there's a little sovereign piece of land over there, which means it has its own rules. But they're actually not ruling from the Constitution down to you. They're at a level where they follow the bylaws of the United States of America Corporation, which could give a fuck about the Constitution. They are interpreting your life down there as it relates to the Constitution that you accept as your rules of how you think you should be living your life. And that's why crazy things happen in the world, where people get away scot-free, because there's legal precedents to protect these individuals, right? I've said it a couple times. The Queen of England cannot have legally any charges put against her. It's illegal. You can't do it. Interesting. Goes for, I think, the whole royal family. Sure, they'll parade around some things out there to make you feel like people are getting prosecuted, but that's all just a show to make you feel like they're sticking it to the man. But they're not. They will do their own punishment. If you embarrass the family, you run off with a bunch of little girls to Monaco, like one of the relatives of the Windsor family did, they'll say, you made us look bad. We're taking away your money. We're taking away your authority. You don't get the mansion anymore for maybe a year or two, or maybe your whole life. You really did a really bad thing. So it's not like they're completely escaping it, but if they wanted to just blow the whole thing off, they could. And the people, unless they rise up and gain sovereignty and really enforce some rights all the way across the board of humanity, allowing one last name to change someone's privileges in this world, right? It's going to continue to be this way. And one more thing on this kind of faux note, because this is another subject that's really important to me, and you see it all the time, and it's not enough to put a whole episode on top of it. This is one you need to learn and one you need to pass around to your friends. These Senate hearings that are going on in America right now to try and find all the corruption in our three-letter agencies, when they bring someone in, like, for instance, the woman that ran the IRS and did a bunch of sort of predatorial things using the IRS to go after the Tea Party, and everyone is Republican, and everybody that, was basically against the current administration. And that woman goes in there, and boy, they read her the riot act, and I think she pleads the fifth like 50 times, And when you watch Trey Gowdy go after it, that guy's a monster, right? I love that dude. That is all, at least up until 2018, January. It's all ceremonial. It is a stunt that they have been pulling probably since the McCarthy era. McCarthy was serious. He was trying to put people in jail, right? And the whole time I was growing up as a child, I thought he was a nutcase, and then later I found out, oh my God, he was actually the only sane dude in the government at the time. But they pull people in and they yell at them on C-SPAN. And you watch it and you feel vindicated in your heart. You're like, oh my God, these people are in so much trouble. Look at how all the senators know that they committed all these freaking felonies and these treasonistic crimes that will, if you're found guilty of treason in America, the minimum jail time is 5 years and the maximum punishment is capital punishment. They kill you. But none of these fuckers go to jail, do they? Ever. That lady's completely free. Comey will be free unless something else gets exposed. These guys are destroying text messages right now. They destroyed Hillary's emails. These are treasonistic things. If a police officer said, you have an illegal gun in your house, and I say, yes, I do, and here it is, see it? And he goes, well, I'll be back with the search warrant. We're gonna get that gun from you, and I destroy it. I go to jail. I tamper with evidence. I committed a crime. I obstructed justice. But Hillary Clinton's capable of doing that. She, bleaches her servers. And then she got to run for president of the United fucking States after that. So this is the one thing in America that needs to change. We need to have these senatorial hearings where every one of these fuckers goes to jail. I mean, they get escorted out of the room with handcuffs. But it's not happening yet. These are the changes that need to occur. I've said it once, and I'll say it one more time to kick out this episode. When Donald Trump became president, a bunch of my friends, who are absolutely the voids of intellectuality, said, he's going to take us back 40 years. I guess they were referring to segregation and racism and all this other crazy stuff. When the guy employs more minorities in the United States of America as a single business owner than any other human being in the entire country, Okay. And they love him, by the way. I remember America 40 years ago. Hell, I'd say take us back 60 years. Let's go 7 years back. Let's go back to the 1950s, right after rock and roll was invented. Because we had single income households. Every kid got a degree and a trade skill that was immediately employable. And yeah, those degrees don't necessarily work today in the age of robots and computers, but we'll just find the ones that do and yank all this other crap out of there. So spare me the attempt to be deep. You have no fucking clue what you're talking about if that's the kind of thing you're saying. And I'm proverbially talking around you to the people that you have to listen to on a daily basis. This country was amazing. And it got so amazing that Europe moved in the 70s and destroyed our education system. Go read the book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserby. Her father was a skull and bones guy. She saw all the corruption on a family level, could not handle it, and she got out of it as soon as she was sentient of it. She tried to warn us, and the Deliberate Dumbing Down of America is a huge re-engineering of the educational system in America to destroy the family, to destroy education, to destroy small towns by moving big giant corporations in like Walmart's and destroying all the merchant sales that were going on, taking the money out of America and sending it to European banking cartels instead of leaving it in the small little town because everyone could resell shoes and boots and groceries. My little town was the most thriving Norman Rockwell painting you have ever seen in your life. And now it struggles. It has plenty of citizens that have no clue what's going on, and they like the Walmart page, and they say, you know, Trump's such a douche, not knowing anything about the Podesta brothers, about the huge body count in the Clinton family, Seth Rich being murdered. They don't know anything about a Fusion 1. They have no idea what that is. Uranium 1, or Fusion GPS and Uranium 1. They don't have any idea what those things are. Let's hope that this year is the calm, or this month, is the calm before the storm. And let's hope that storm is ferocious in the name of your sovereignty and your civil rights. Because we're all going to be slaves to something. But let it be the personal endeavors of our id, our insides, and not being subject to banking cartels and overblown socialistic, fashionistic governments, right? I think you feel me. That's all I got. If you dig the show, go to deepthoughtsradio.com. From there are all the feeds. We'll do a short bumper today. Everything's there. Video, audio, Patreon, whatever you like. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now. What I haven't found is I go into a room where someone isn't a business owner, super highly educated, not telling me propaganda back from these fake news organizations, who knows what's going on in the world. What the fuck am I trying to say? Yeah, actually, that's right.